Hi, welcome everyone. It's Burt and Suzy here. We were just sitting around on this super hot Vancouver day talking some amazing truths, and we decided that we wanted to record it just in case it might be something someone else might want to hear. So, Burt, earlier today we were talking about awareness versus thought.
Versus thought. And if we could understand the difference between the two, awareness and thought, then everything becomes clear. And the thing is that we always try to make everything into a thought, into a tangible. So therefore we have to think about it. And unless we're thinking about it and we're creating a mental picture, then we cannot actually feel it. But the point is that what we are trying to feel is not a thought, but an awareness. Earlier we were talking about knowing your true nature. And I asked how, when you begin to feel that you're all alone, and how we separated from God. How
Right.
those started, in other words, okay? The Big
Right.
Bang.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it all started this morning when we were having a conversation, and my question was it was driving from this one statement in the course basically, and it was a question I've had, and it's in the section Fear and Conflict in chapter 2, and he's explaining fear. When Jesus talks about fear, he's saying the correction of fear is your responsibility. When you ask for release from fear, you are implying it not. And then he says you should ask instead for help in the condition that brought this fear about. Now, the next statement is
That's
so
right.
key. It says this condition always entails a willingness to be separate.
There's the willingness to be separate.
Right. So when we woke up this morning,
In other words, I want to get my ego in the way.
That's
you see?
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. And when we woke up this morning and we were having a conversation, and I was struggling trying to word what it was that something just was nagging at me in the back of my mind, something I needed to bring forward and to somehow express. And you brought up awareness and thoughts, and about how getting the idea of awareness and thought is so key. And I was thinking to myself, well, in the Course, he's not saying, he talks about awareness occasionally, and he talks about thoughts. But Jesus words it this way: awareness is God in the Course, or
That's
it's
right.
knowledge. And thoughts can be thought of as our judgment.
Right.
Because thoughts are everything that we're constantly trying to interpret what we see, the world, the people we run into, all of this in relationship to me. What's it mean to me?
Right.
And back to the statement, it always entails a willingness to be separate. So the difference between awareness and thought is awareness is transcending that desire to be separate.
That's right. And that desire to be separate is so strong that it feels like you're going to die if the ego dies, because there will be no more you. But the thought was, like you have told me your experience and I have experienced, is that when the thought of I actually dies, you feel more alive than you've ever felt before.
Right.
And the reason is because you connect more with that which you truly are. For example, let's say when Ramana Maharshi developed a great fear of death, he lied down and said, okay, now I am dying. And he went through the experience of the fear that he was feeling, because he doesn't want to die. But when he experienced it fully, he realized there is no death. And the moment he went into the very fear itself, the fear disappeared and he realized his true nature. And at that moment, he was
Pure awareness.
pure awareness. You see, it's no longer a thought, it's no longer separate. And in that awareness lies all the love, because there is no separation at all. And now, could you rephrase the statements I made to you earlier about that? How we discussed it a moment ago.
Right. Well, 3 years ago, I had probably what would have been what I would call one of my most spiritually transformative awakenings. It lasted 3 or 4 days. It occurred like a few weeks after I arrived in Vancouver in this apartment I was renting downtown. And I was, at the time, reading the Course is what I was doing. And strangely enough, I was listening to meditative music and also listening to Osho quotes. And I don't know how it all happened, but suddenly I became very aware of the fact, or I had the very, very strong realization that this is all there is. And I'm it. I'm the only thing there is.
Yeah.
And at that moment, it was phenomenal. It was just like phenomenal joy. And I actually had, even though I've never really believed in Kundalini, I actually had at the same time a series of Kundalini Awakenings. Essentially, they were bodily movements that I couldn't control. But that's something I can go into later. But the thing that, even though it was really beautiful, this awakening, it was only partial because there was this giant fear of, oh my God, I'm all alone in the universe. There's only me. And that sort of caused me to back up a little bit on that awakening. So even though I had this 3 days of incredible happiness and love and joy, there was this sense of, oh my God, I'm the only one there ever is. I'm the only thing there's ever been. This is all there is. This is it. Now, this statement this morning that I was trying to understand the last few days, or that I thought was so key about fear, I realized that this fear doesn't just apply to me at a bodily level, thinking I'm Suzy in a world when fear comes up in my seeming world, but the fear he's talking about is this fear I encountered in that amazing realization.
Right.
And so I realized I backed out of that realization and I went back to a sense of duality or fake belief in this duality. But now I see that with this statement, there was no I alone in the universe. There was simply what is. There was simply, as the Course calls it, God is.
Right.
And that's this pure awareness. That's this love.
And that's the love. That's the totality. Because you realize that even the people that you see, they felt separate and strangers, therefore. But when you realize that there is really no you, and you face it like you did, which took courage, realize that you are everyone that you see and feel. You are the very awareness itself. And that awareness is not a thought, because it has no division. It has no separation. Thought is always dividing. Thought is always
about me, separate me.
Separate me. Awareness is, you see? And so when people get confused and they said, but there is no God, and how do I know there is a God, and blah, 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 they're making God into some superior being who is overall in charge and commanding us to live this and this and that way. But God itself is nothing but absolute unconditional love, pure unadulterated love. He is everything and everyone that is. So when he looks at us, God is seeing itself as the one. Am I making myself clear?
It's beautiful.
It's all one being.
It's the gift of eternal life.
It's the gift of eternal life, undying love. You see, no beginning and no end. See, when we talk about even the history of the world, we often think in terms of time. I listen to non-duality teachers, and they talk about the world and how it started in the Big Bang, or when consciousness came into being, and they said this was the time when we took on the body. But they don't go far enough, because the world has begun, yes, but the living, the being, never began. There was never a time when you and I were born, or anybody.
Right.
Okay? Birth never took place. There was always being. But you see, we confine awareness and not awareness and thought as one and the same. They are not the same at all. What happens is that initially we were all one awareness called God. That's it, you see? We were God, actually, itself. And then God decided, or whatever, we have to use those terms, those human terms, and he decided to express himself.
He had a
to
thought.
feel himself, the thought.
What would it be like to be separate?
That thought came from somewhere within the multitude of awareness.
What's extraordinary about what you're saying is that reading the tiny mind idea in the Course,
Yeah.
it sounds, oh, that's an interesting thing. But it didn't apply to me. But now, talking about that awakening I had, where all of a sudden I backed down on that, recognizing at that point there was only there was only me alone in this universe, is what it seemed like. At that point in time, I did back down to I want others, because I don't want there to be me. I don't want to be responsible for this, because I felt that responsibility, because also, I hadn't gone all the way to this pure awareness.
That's right. And because you haven't
Yes.
gone to this pure awareness,
Right.
there was still a state of feeling alone or separate. That stayed.
That's right, the loneliness. It was like I was alone in the universe.
So when we think of God, pure awareness, pure unadulterated love, pure unconditional love, total heavenly love, okay? He was, or when I say he, it was total and absolute pure awareness. And then it decided to manifest itself in many forms. See? So God actually from himself, just like the sun throws its beams, millions of beams, okay? God spread himself and became these billions of humans, okay? But they were all God. But then there came the idea, because it was all pure awareness, as he spread out in those state of being everything, there came a mad idea, what would it be like to feel separate? Like you were saying.
Right.
I'm just continuing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And that state of awareness that I can be separate created what we know now as consciousness. You see, consciousness did not come from the brain, it did not come from anywhere. It came from the idea.
Tiny that idea.
Tiny that idea.
The noise out there. It's gone, I think.
It's gone, okay. And so from that tiny mad idea came the thought that there are many people separate from each other, but in truth, there was only pure awareness appearing as maybe billions of...
The whole universe.
The whole universe itself, right. But in truth, it was all one being. But we can't conceive of that one being I am. You know, and I had a glimpse of that when I was contemplating my state, who am I, like Ramana Maharshi did. And I'll find that really there is no birth. But then the fear comes in because you want birth to be there, you see? But in truth, there is no birth at all. There is just I am. When that feeling, I'm just trying to find how it came to me as an awareness, I knew that everybody I saw at that moment, everybody that was all a part of me. We're all a oneness. But that oneness is not separate. It's not made up of separate bodies. It's made up. I'm trying to think too much right now.
Well, in the Course, when it says that the last, it talks about perception and knowledge, and it has wrong perception where we think we're a body in the world, right perception where we start to believe the truth, but we're still within the realm of perception as we seem to forgive. And then there's knowledge which transcends it. The Course says the highest form within perception is when you see the face of Christ in your brother. So what you're talking about is all these other beings. Yes. At first they're a separate being, but then you actually look at them and they remind you of God is, basically.
Yes. God is that awareness. We're all the same, one awareness.
Oh, and without thought. Okay, we're talking judgment and thought. Like, I wrote something on the board, it's beautiful. It says, to awaken, don't judge. It comes from the Course.
That's right. Judgment came when we decided we want to be separate, we feel separate. And then the separation came as a form of human. So consciousness came into being and created the form called human being. You see? But the human form, each one knew that they were. I am. You see? But I am became, I am Burt. I am Suzy.
And that in itself is a judgment.
And that became the judgment of who you think you are and it created called the ego. So the ego took over, and this is when consciousness came into being, created that kind of ego. But in truth, and this is the beautiful thing that we finally realize, is that in truth, the ego doesn't exist at all. In truth.
No, not at all.
Therefore, because we always existed, because time doesn't exist, there is no time, there is no beginning or end, right? Time only came into being when the body was formed as an ego. So therefore, if time didn't exist, we seem to be here separate, but in truth we are not.
No.
We are all God. We are all the same one God. And when that starts hitting you, that you are this pure awareness, we are only happy when we are loving. We are only happy and fulfilled, not when we have $1 million or own power, because that is the body, the ego that's doing it. But when we become totally convinced that we are the one itself, I am, that I amness itself establishes itself as the God that you are. And so when you look at someone else, you see yourself.
That's right. So
And
when
you see
I
no separation. Yeah.
when I look at you, if I look at you without any judgment whatsoever, at that moment, you're not Burt. You're not somebody I knew 10 minutes ago.
Same here with you.
You're none of that. In that, you're just this pure light of being.
That's right.
And there's love loving itself.
That's right. That's right. And I see the same when I look at you. Yeah. And that's what loving itself. Yeah. We don't love someone. Love is.
Just like God is.
Just like God is. Right. Now there are some people who says, well, I am an atheist and I don't believe in God. This is all because there is no understanding of the dynamic of awareness versus thought.
Right.
That is it. Once you know the difference between awareness and thought, then you know the truth. Okay? God is pure awareness. And who are you? Pure awareness.
Right. So pure awareness in this instance, my acceptance of you without any thought or judgment, is that pure awareness. Is God is.
When you see me without an ego, even though you see me as a form, but you know that beyond this form, I am you, you are me.
Wow.
See, we are this one energy. That's the only real love that exists.
Wow.
Now, God is us, we are God. There is only God. There is nothing else but God. It's all one being, you see? And when we finally wake up to that one fact of that awareness, then we know the difference between awareness and thought. Thought comes and goes. Awareness never. So therefore, thought exists in time. Awareness never existed.
Right. So in the case of...
It always was.
So
it just is.
Just is. So in the case of people who've been studying the Course for years, who aren't familiar with those terms, this pure awareness is God.
Is God.
And the thoughts are the judgment.
That's right.
And without the judgment, in that moment, without judgment, there's just this incredible sense of being.
This incredible sense of being. And
Wow.
here I am. I am.
Wow.
I am eternal. I am immortal. I am God. I am being. Wow.
Wow.
And it has nothing to do with ego because there is no ego.
Right.
See, there's only being. And then I look at you and I see the same thing. You see? And I look at anybody else, same thing. And this is when the world itself sees itself as a big distortion, maybe, or of consciousness, or simply a dream. Yeah, the word is dream.
Dream.
Yeah, we dream that we are separate. We dream that we're living in this world, but in truth, only heaven exists. And heaven simply means that you're living in that state of pure awareness all the time, beyond time, beyond space, beyond any limitation, whatever.
And you're awake from the dream.
And you're awake from the dream. That's right. And that's what love is. And love is pure awareness.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful?
That's beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, thank you.